The sun had barely risen over the jagged peaks of the Sierra Mountains when John Calloway tightened his grip on the reins of his horse. His boots, caked with dust from days of relentless travel, tapped lightly against the saddle as he urged the animal forward. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, but John's mind was far from appreciating nature's beauty. His heart pounded like a war drum in his chest, each beat echoing the question that haunted him. Where was she? It had been 3 days since Sarah disappeared by the river. 3 days of searching under the scorching desert sun, through dense forests where shadows danced unervingly, and across rocky terrains that tested both man and beast. But no trace of her could be found, save for one peculiar clue. A donkey. John remembered the moment vividly. He had returned to their small ranch late last night, weary and defeated after another fruitless day of combing the banks of the Rio Grande. As he dismounted his horse and dragged himself toward the porch, he saw it, a mangy old donkey standing near the corral gate, its ears drooping lazily. At first glance, it seemed out of place, almost surreal. Donkeys weren't uncommon in these parts, but this one carried something unusual slung over its back. A pair of shoes. Sarah's shoes. They were unmistakable, the same ones she'd worn the day she vanished. Her laughter still rang in his ears as she splashed water onto her bare feet while dipping them into the cool river current. And now, here they were, resting atop an animal that refused to move despite John's desperate attempts to shoo it away. "Who are you?" John muttered under his breath, staring at the creature as if it might answer. But the donkey only blinked, its brown eyes holding a wisdom that defied explanation. Little did John know then that this peculiar encounter would unravel secrets buried deeper than any grave. The ranch lay nestled at the edge of a sprawling desert, surrounded by mesas that loomed ominously against the horizon. It wasn't much, a modest wooden cabin with a weathered fence enclosing a patch of land barely suitable for crops. But it was home. For John and Sarah, it represented freedom, love, and hope amidst the harsh realities of the Wild West. But now, that sense of security felt shattered. The cabin stood silent, its windows dark and lifeless. Inside, the furniture remained untouched since the day Sarah went missing. A chair sat askew beside the fireplace, a half-knitted scarf abandoned on the table. Even the clock ticked on, oblivious of the chaos outside its walls. John paced the room, his shadow stretching long across the floorboards. Outside, the wind howled softly, carrying with it the whispers of the past. He stopped abruptly, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. "Why didn't I stop her?" he growled, more to himself than anyone else. If only he hadn't let her wander so far alone. If only he'd insisted she stay closer to the house. But then, little did he know, there were forces at play far greater than his own regrets. The next morning dawned clear and bright, though the promise of warmth brought little comfort to John. With the donkey now tied securely to the hitching post, he set out once again along the riverbank. This time, however, he carried not just determination, but also a strange unease. The presence of those shoes and the mysterious animal that delivered them felt less like coincidence and more like a sign, a warning, perhaps. As he walked, the landscape unfolded around him in stark contrast to his inner turmoil. To his left stretched endless fields of golden grass, swaying gently in the breeze. To his right, the Rio Grande wound its way through the valley, its waters shimmering like liquid silver beneath the sunlight. Yet despite the breathtaking scenery, John couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching him. He paused briefly, scanning the trees lining the opposite bank. Shadows flickered among the branches, though whether they belonged to animals or men, John couldn't tell. Shrugging off a sensation, he continued onward, following the trail of muddy footprints that led further upstream, until, suddenly, everything changed. It began with a sound, a low, guttural growl, that sent chills down John's spine. He froze mid-step, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver holstered at his side. From within the thicket ahead emerged a figure cloaked entirely in darkness, its movements deliberate yet unsettling. For a moment, John thought it must be some wild beast, driven mad by hunger or thirst. But as the figure stepped into the light, he realized his mistake. It was human, or at least it appeared to be. The stranger wore tattered clothing, stained with dirt and blood, and carried a rifle slung carelessly over one shoulder. His face, hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, betrayed no emotion. When he spoke, his voice was gravelly, laced with menace. "You shouldn't have come looking for her," the man said, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. John stiffened, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Who are you? What do you know about Sarah?" The stranger chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "Let's just say she owes me something." Before John could respond, the man raised a hand, signaling for silence. Then, without warning, he turned and disappeared back into the woods, leaving John alone once more. But the lingering sense of danger remained, pressing heavily upon his shoulders. Hours passed, and still John pressed on, driven by a mixture of fear and desperation. By late afternoon, he reached a clearing where the river widened into a shallow pool. Here, the water reflected the sky above, creating an illusion of infinity. And here, too, he discovered something unexpected. Tracks, not just Sarah's, but others, men's boots, horses' hooves, even a distinctive pattern of wagon wheels. They crisscrossed the soft mud, forming a tangled web that told stories of its own. Someone or something had passed through here recently, and whatever it was, it hadn't been alone. John knelt beside the tracks, running his fingers over the impressions left behind. His heart raced as he pieced together the possibilities. Had Sarah been taken, or had she gone willingly? And if the latter, why? But then, as he examined the ground more closely, he noticed something else. A single feather, delicate and white, caught in the reeds nearby. It looked out of place, almost magical, against the otherwise rugged terrain. Picking it up, John held it between his thumb and forefinger, studying it intently. Its origin was unknown, but its significance undeniable. "This isn't over," he whispered, clutching the feather tightly before rising to his feet. Whatever answers awaited him, he vowed to uncover them, no matter the cost. Night fell swiftly, blanketing the world in darkness, save for the glow of countless stars scattered across the heavens. John made camp near the river, lighting a small fire to ward off both the cold and the creatures lurking in the shadows. As flames licked hungrily at the dry wood, he pulled out his bedroll and settled down, though sleep eluded him. His thoughts drifted to Sarah, imagining her somewhere out there, cold and afraid, perhaps crying silently as she wondered if anyone would come for her. The image tore at his heart, fueling a resolve stronger than ever before. He wouldn't fail her, not again. Just as he began to drift off, a noise startled him awake. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably human. A cry, muffled yet urgent. Without hesitation, John grabbed his revolver and crept toward the source, every nerve in his body tingling with anticipation. And there, hidden among the bushes, he found her. Sarah. She was alive, though pale and trembling, her clothes torn and dirty. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clung to him, sobbing uncontrollably. For a moment, John allowed himself to feel relief, holding her close as though afraid she might vanish once more. But as the initial shock faded, questions began to surface. "What happened?" he asked gently, brushing strands of hair from her face. "Who took you?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting nervously toward the forest. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "It's not who, it's what?" Confused, John followed her gaze, searching for whatever she feared so deeply. But all he saw was emptiness, until, suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Out of nowhere, a monstrous form erupted from the earth itself, its massive bulk dwarfing everything around it. It resembled no creature John had ever seen, with scales glinting like armor and eyes glowing red with malice. Roaring deafeningly, it lunged toward them, claws extended and ready to strike. Instinctively, John shoved Sarah aside, drawing his revolver as he faced the beast head-on. Bullets ricocheted harmlessly off its hide, sparking sparks of fire with each impact. Desperation clawed at his throat as he realized the futility of his weapon. There was no way he could defeat such a monstrosity alone. Yet, just as all seemed lost, a familiar sound echoed to the clearing, the braying of a donkey. From the tree emerged a mangy creature John had encountered earlier, though now it bore an expression of fierce determination. On its back sat a figure cloaked in black, wielding a staff tipped with a glowing crystal. Without hesitation, the rider leapt into action, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that struck the creature squarely in the chest. Stunned, John watched as the battle unfolded before him. The rider fought with unmatched skill, weaving gracefully between attacks while delivering precise strikes. Slowly but surely, the beast weakened, its roars growing weaker until, finally, it collapsed in a heap, defeated. Breathing heavily, the rider approached, lowering the staff as they removed their hood. Beneath lay a woman whose age was impossible to discern, her features marked by years of hardship, yet radiating an aura of quiet strength. "She's safe now," the woman said simply, nodding toward Sarah. "But beware, their kind does not forgive easily." With that cryptic warning, she remounted the donkey and disappeared into the night, leaving John and Sarah alone once more. In the weeks that followed, life returned to some semblance of normalcy at the ranch. Though the memory of that night lingered heavily in their minds, neither John nor Sarah spoke of it openly. Instead, they focused on rebuilding, planting new crops, and repairing fences damaged by storms. And though the donkey never returned, they often spotted its tracks near the riverbank, a reminder of the debt they owed. Yet deep down, John knew the story wasn't truly over. Hidden truths remained buried, waiting patiently for the day they would rise again. Until then, he vowed to protect Sarah, no matter what dangers lay ahead. For in the Wild West, nothing was ever simple, and sometimes the most unbelievable tales were the ones closest to home. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, but the memory of that night by the river remained etched in John's mind like a branding iron. The image of the monstrous creature, its glowing red eyes filled with malice, haunted his dreams. And yet, there was something else, a lingering question that gnawed at him, refusing to let go. Who was the woman on the donkey? What power did she wield? And why had she chosen to intervene? Little did John know then that these questions would lead him down a path far more perilous than he could have imagined. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, Sarah approached John with a look of unease. She clutched a piece of paper tightly in her hand, her knuckles white from the grip. "John," she began hesitantly, "I found this near the river today." He took the paper from her, unfolding it carefully. It was an old map, yellow with age, marked with strange symbols and cryptic notations. At its center lay a circle location, labeled the Forgotten Hollow. Beneath it, written in faded ink, were the words, "Beware the ones who walk between worlds." John's brow furrowed. "Where did you find this?" "By the rocks where I was taken," Sarah replied softly. "It was wedged between two stones, almost hidden. I thought, maybe it has something to do with what happened." His instincts screamed warning, but curiosity overrode caution. If this map held answers about the beast, the mysterious rider, or even Sarah's ordeal, it was worth investigating. Packing only essentials, he promised Sarah he'd return soon and set out under the cover of darkness. The journey to the coordinates marked on the map proved arduous. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous as he ventured deeper into uncharted territory, far beyond the familiar boundaries of the Rio Grande. By day, the heat scorched his skin. By night, the cold bit mercilessly through his coat. Yet, despite the hardships, John pressed on, driven by an unyielding determination. On the third night of his trek, he arrived at the edge of a dense forest, its trees towering like ancient sentinels guarding secrets buried within their shadows. Above, the moon hung low, casting eerie silhouettes upon the ground. As he entered the woods, the air seemed to grow heavier, charged with an energy both exhilarating and oppressive. Somewhere ahead, deep within the heart of the forest, lay the Forgotten Hollow. The deeper John ventured, the stranger the atmosphere became. Whispers carried on the wind, indistinct yet hauntingly familiar. Shadows danced erratically, defying logic. Once, he swore he saw the outline of a figure moving among the trees, though whenever he turned to investigate, nothing remained but empty space. Finally, after hours of walking, he emerged into a clearing bathed in silver moonlight. At its center stood a stone altar, carved with intricate designs that glowed faintly in the darkness. Surrounding it were remnants of a long-abandoned settlement. Crumbling cabins, rusted tools, and fragments of pottery scattered haphazardly across the ground. But it was a sound that truly unnerved him. A rhythmic pounding, like distant drums, reverberated through the air, growing louder with each passing moment. Then came the voices, not human, but otherworldly, singing in a language unknown to him. Frozen in place, John watched as figures materialized from the shadows, cloaked in flowing robes that shimmered like starlight. They moved with unnatural grace, circling the altar as they chanted in unison. In their midst stood the woman from the riverbank, her staff aglow with radiant light. She noticed him immediately, her gaze piercing through the darkness. Without breaking stride, she raised a hand, silencing the others. The chanting ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against John's ears. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice calm but laced with authority. "I need answers," John replied, stepping forward despite the fear clawing at his insides. "About the beast, about Sarah, about everything." The woman studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You are brave, John Calloway, but bravery alone will not suffice against what lies ahead. That night by the river was merely the beginning. There are forces at work older than your kind, forces that seek to bridge the gap between realms. And if they succeed..." Her words trailed off, leaving John to fill in the blanks himself. He opened his mouth to ask more, but she shook her head, cutting him off. "Your time here is done. Return to your world, and guard it well, for when the veil grows thin, all will be tested." Before he could protest, the ground beneath him trembled violently. The clearing dissolved into chaos, and John found himself tumbling backward through space and time, the world around him blurring into oblivion. When he awoke, he was back at the edge of the forest, the map clutched tightly in his hand. The events of the night felt surreal, almost dreamlike, yet the ache in his muscles and the dirt caked onto his clothes testified to their reality. Back at the ranch, Sarah greeted him with relief, her eyes searching his face for some sign of understanding. But John couldn't bring himself to share what he'd learned. Not yet. Instead, he focused on rebuilding, strengthening the fences, sharpening the knives, and preparing for whatever might come next. For he knew now that the battle wasn't just about protecting Sarah. It was about protecting everything they held dear, from forces that walked unseen, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. And so, as the seasons changed and the stars wheeled endlessly above, John Calloway stood vigilant, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because in the Wild West, danger lurked not only in the shadows, but also in places where dreams and nightmares intertwined. The months that followed were restless, filled with an unease John couldn't quite shake. He spent his days strengthening the ranch's defenses, reinforcing walls and sharpening tools until they gleamed under the sun. At night, he sat by the fire, staring into its flickering depths as though hoping to glimpse some hidden truth. The map now lay tucked away in a drawer, its symbols still cryptic but burning brightly in his mind. Sarah noticed a change in him, of course. She asked no questions, knowing instinctively that something had shifted during his journey to Forgotten Hollow. Instead, she worked alongside him, her presence a quiet anchor amidst the growing storm of uncertainty. But even her steady hand couldn't fully calm the tempest brewing within John's soul. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a rider approached the ranch. Dust kicked up behind their horse, swirling like a ghostly cloud before settling onto the dry earth. John stepped out onto the porch, his hand resting lightly on the revolver at his hip. The figure reined in their mount and dismounted slowly, revealing a man whose face was both familiar and strange. "John Calloway," the man said, tipping his hat forward. His voice carried the weight of years spent traversing rough terrains. "We've not met, but I know your name." "And who might you be?" John asked cautiously, his fingers tightening slightly on the gun. "My name is Elias Kane," the stranger replied. "I'm here because of what happened by the river, and because of what's coming." Elias wasn't just any traveler. Over the next few hours, as they sat together inside the cabin, sipping coffee brewed over the hearth. John learned that Elias was a wanderer with knowledge far beyond the ordinary. He spoke of realms that intersected with this one, places where time flowed differently and creatures existed outside the bounds of human comprehension. And he confirmed what John had begun to suspect, that the events surrounding Sarah's disappearance were part of something much larger. "The woman you saw at the altar," Elias explained, leaning forward and lowering his voice, "she's one of the guardians. They watch over the boundaries between worlds, ensuring that nothing crosses unless it's meant to. But lately, those boundaries have been weakening. Something or someone is trying to tear them apart." John listened intently, every word striking a chord deep within him. "And the beast?" Elias nodded grimly. "It was a harbinger, a creature born from the chaos seeping through the cracks. But it wasn't acting alone. There are others, men who seek power beyond mortal understanding. They believe that by bridging the gap between worlds, they can gain dominion over both." Sarah, who had been listening quietly from the corner of the room, finally spoke. Who would do such a thing? Why risk destroying everything for power? Elias sighed, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "Some men will stop at nothing to satisfy their ambitions. These ones call themselves the Order of the Veil. They've been gathering strength for years, searching for ways to weaken the barriers. And if they succeed," his words hung in the air, unspoken but understood. The revelation sent ripples through the small family. For days afterward, John found himself pacing the length of the cabin late into the night, wrestling with the implications. If Elias was right, then the danger wasn't confined to the wilderness or the supernatural. It extended to humanity itself. Men driven by greed and hubris posed as great a threat as any monstrous creature. But there was another layer to the story, one Elias hinted at, but refused to elaborate on. When pressed, he merely shook his head and muttered something about secrets best left buried. This only fueled John's curiosity, driving him to delve deeper into the mystery. It started with the map. Taking out once more, he examined the symbols etched into its surface. Some resembled constellations, while others looked like ancient runes. With Elias' help, they began deciphering the markings, piecing together fragments of information that painted a clearer picture of the forgotten history tied to Forgotten Hollow. As they worked, Sarah joined in, her sharp mind proving invaluable. Together, the trio uncovered references to an artifact known as a Heartstone, a relic said to hold immense power, capable of either strengthening the barriers between worlds or shattering them entirely. According to legend, it had been hidden long ago, buried deep within the earth to prevent its misuse. If the Order finds it, Elias trailed off, his expression darkening. They'll use it to open the gates. John finished for him, his stomach churning at the thought. The decision to act came swiftly. Leaving the ranch unguarded wasn't an option, so John devised a plan. While Elias continued researching the Heartstone's location, John and Sarah prepared for the inevitable confrontation. They gathered supplies, honed their skills, and trained relentlessly, determined to be ready when the time came. Their preparations weren't in vain. One morning, as dawn broke over the horizon, a group of riders appeared on the horizon, dressed in black, their faces obscured by wide-brimmed hats. They approached the ranch with deliberate purpose. John recognized the insignia emblazoned on their jackets, the symbol of the Order of the Veil. "You've meddled in matters beyond your understanding," one of the men called out, his voice carrying across the distance. "Hand over the map, and we may let you live." John stood his ground, his hand steady on the revolver. Beside him, Sarah gripped a rifle, her stance unwavering. "You won't get it," he shouted back. "Not without a fight." The ensuing battle was fierce, bullets tearing through the air as dust swirled around them like a maelstrom. Despite being outnumbered, John and Sarah fought with ferocity born of desperation. Time and again, they drove the attackers back, refusing to yield. But the Order wasn't easily deterred. Even as they retreated, their leader vowed revenge, promising that the next encounter would leave no survivors. In the aftermath, John realized that retreat was no longer an option. The only way to protect their home, and the world beyond it, was to find the Heartstone first. With Elias leading the way, they set out once more, following clues scattered across the land. Each step brought them closer to uncovering the truth, but also deeper into danger. Their journey led them through deserts scorching enough to peel paint, forests thick with tangled roots and whispering shadows, and mountains whose peaks pierced the heavens. Along the way, they encountered allies and adversaries alike, each encounter shaping their understanding of the forces at play. And all the while, the clock ticked inexorably forward, counting down to a moment when the veil between worlds would grow thin once more. Until then, John Calloway and his companions remained steadfast, bound by a shared purpose and a promise to stand against whatever darkness sought to consume them. For in the Wild West, where legends walked among men and monsters prowled the night, survival wasn't just about grit and determination. It was about believing in something greater than oneself. And John Calloway believed wholeheartedly that he could make a difference, no matter the odds stacked against him. The journey to uncover the Heartstone became an odyssey that tested the limits of John, Sarah, and Elias. Days blurred into nights as they traversed landscapes both breathtaking and unforgiving. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, yet none of them faltered. The stakes were too high, the consequences of failure too dire. Their path led them first to a hidden canyon carved deep into the earth, its walls glowing faintly with phosphorescent minerals. Here, they discovered ancient carvings etched into the rock, symbols identical to those on the map. Elias studied them intently, tracing their lines with his fingers as though hoping to draw out their secrets. "These are warnings," he murmured, his voice low and tense. "They speak of a time when the barriers between worlds nearly failed. A great war was fought here, between the Guardians and those who sought to destroy them." John frowned, glancing around at the desolate expanse. "And what happened?" Elias shook his head grimly. "The Guardians prevailed, but at great cost. Many fell, and the land itself bears the scars of their struggle. But look closer." He pointed to one particular carving, depicting a figure holding aloft a radiant stone. This must be the Heartstone. It was used to seal the breach, restoring balance, but at the price of being buried away, hidden from all who might misuse it. Sarah touched the carving lightly, her brow furrowed. "So, how we find it? If it's truly hidden, won't the Order already know where to look?" "Not necessarily," Elias replied. "If the Guardians did their work properly, the location would be encoded in riddles or puzzles meant only for those worthy enough to solve them. We'll need more than just maps to proceed. Clues continue to guide them onward, each new discovery bringing them closer to the truth while simultaneously deepening the mystery." In a forgotten library tucked within a cavern system, they found scrolls written in archaic languages, detailing rituals and incantations tied to the Heartstone. Elias worked tirelessly to translate them, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, but alight with determination. One passage, in particular, caught his attention. It spoke of a place called the Well of Echoes, a site where the whispers of the past could still be heard. According to legend, it served as a gateway to knowledge long lost, a perfect place to seek answers about the Heartstone's whereabouts. Without hesitation, they set off once more, following the directions laid out in the scroll. Their destination lay deep within a dense forest, where towering trees blocked out much of the sunlight, casting the world below in perpetual twilight. Strange noises echoed through the underbrush, rustling leaves, distant cries, and the occasional snap of twigs beneath unseen feet. As they neared the heart of the forest, the air grew colder despite the oppressive heat outside. Mist swirled around them, thickening until visibility was reduced to mere feet. Then, suddenly, the mist parted, revealing a clearing dominated by a massive stone structure shaped like a well. "This is it," Elias breathed, stepping forward cautiously. The well loomed before them, its surface smooth and unblemished, except for a single indentation near the rim. Within the indentation rested a small crystal, pulsing faintly with light. "What does it do?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It listens," Elias replied. "Speak your question aloud, and if you're pure of intent, it will answer." John exchanged a glance with Sarah before stepping forward. Clearing his throat, he addressed the well directly. "Where's the Heartstone?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the crystal began to glow brighter, its light spreading outward until it illuminated the entire clearing. From somewhere deep within the well came a voice, not human, but resonant, as though carried by the wind itself. To claim the Heartstone, you must venture to the Mountain of Shadows. There, amidst the ruins of a fallen city, lies the key to unlocking its resting place. But beware, trials await, and not all who seek shall return. The light faded as abruptly as it had appeared, leaving the trio standing in silence. Finally, John broke the stillness. Then we go. The Mountain of Shadows proved to be every bit as daunting as its name suggested. Rising jaggedly from the surrounding plains, it seemed to pierce the sky itself, its peaks shrouded in perpetual darkness. As they climbed, the air grew thinner, each breath harder to draw. Wind howled around them, carrying with it the scent of sulfur and decay. At the base of the mountain, they found remnants of the ancient city mentioned in the well's message. Crumbling buildings stretched endlessly in every direction, their architecture unlike anything John had ever seen. Towers spiraled upward, defying gravity, while intricate carvings adorned every surface, telling stories of a civilization long extinguished. But the city wasn't entirely abandoned. As they ventured deeper, shadows moved in the corners of their vision, fleeting figures darting just out of reach. At first, John thought the mere tricks of the light, but soon it became clear that something or someone was watching them. "We're not alone," Sarah whispered, her hand tightening on her rifle. "No," Elias agreed, scanning the area nervously. "And I fear what happens if we're caught." Their fears were realized sooner than expected. While exploring one particularly elaborate ruin, a group of shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their forms shifting and distorting as though made of smoke rather than flesh. They wore no discernible features, yet their presence was suffocating, pressing against John's mind like a physical force. "You trespass," one of them intoned, its voice a chorus of whispers. "Leave now or face judgment." Before John could respond, Elias stepped forward, raising his hands placatingly. "We mean no harm. We seek only the Heartstone to ensure its protection." The figures hesitated, their forms rippling as though debating among themselves. Finally, the lead figure spoke again. "You carry the mark of the Guardian. Why should we trust you?" Elias glanced at John, then back at the figures. "Because without our help, the veil will fall and chaos will consume everything. Even you." The statement seemed to strike a chord, for the figures backed away slightly, though they didn't disappear entirely. "Prove your worth," the leader commanded. "Pass the trials, and we may grant you passage." The trials were grueling, testing not just their strength but also their resolve and unity. One challenge forced them to navigate a labyrinth filled with illusions designed to prey on their deepest fears. Another required solving complex puzzles inscribed on ancient tablets, each incorrect guess triggering traps that threatened to bury them alive. Through it all, John, Sarah, and Elias supported one another, drawing strength from their shared purpose. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they stood before the final trial, a chamber containing a pedestal upon which rested a fragment of the Heartstone. However, the room was guarded by a colossal creature, its form resembling a hybrid of wolf and serpent, with eyes that burned like molten gold. "This is it," John said grimly, gripping his revolver tightly. "Let's finish this." The battle was fierce, the creature's speed and power unmatched by anything they'd faced before. Bullets and blades alike bounced harmlessly off its scales, forcing them to rely on strategy and teamwork. Sarah managed to distract it with carefully placed shots, allowing Elias to use his staff to weaken its defenses. Meanwhile, John seized opportunity to climb onto its back, driving his knife into a vulnerable spot near its neck. With a deafening roar, the creature collapsed, its body dissolving into ash as the Heartstone fragment floated free. Catching it midair, John held it aloft, its light bathing the room in warmth and hope. Victory, however, was short-lived. As they exited the Mountain of Shadows, they encountered a contingent of the Order of the Veil, led by the same man who had attacked their ranch. His expression twisted with fury as he saw the Heartstone in John's possession. "You fools," he spat. "Do you really think you can stop us? The veil grows thinner with each passing day. Soon, there will be no stopping the flood." John raised the Heartstone, its glow intensifying as he spoke. "Then let's see if you're right." In that moment, the Heartstone unleashed its full power, creating a barrier that repelled the Order's forces. Though victorious, John knew the battle was far from over. The Heartstone was safe, for now, but the war against those who sought to unravel reality itself was only beginning. As they returned to the ranch, weary but resolute, John looked toward the horizon, where the sun dipped below the mountains. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he vowed to face them head-on, protecting not just his family but the fragile balance that kept their world intact. For in the Wild West, where myths walked among men and danger lurked in every shadow, survival demanded courage, and the unwavering belief that even the smallest act of defiance could change the course of destiny.